Michael, I'm curious. Do you think this is a good direction for Lord of the Rings, following the Rings of Power, following the trilogy that was the Hobbit? Do you think that a movie with Gollum is the right direction for Tolkien heads?
So there's a lot that could be said about this. And so first of all, the hunt for Gollum is a part of the appendices in Lord of the Rings and the Return of the King. So not great there. It is an interesting story. I think one reason they did go to the appendices is because it's not a full-fledged story, so they have a lot of wiggle room in how they tell it. However, it's Aragorn being told by Gandalf to find Gollum before the Fellowship. So if you don't have Viggo Mortensen, because he would be even younger than he was in Lord of the Rings, so like having a different actor play Aragorn, or Ian McKellen not be Gandalf, it's a little weird. So that being aside, Andy Serkis, the director of Mowgli, Legend of the Jungle, and Venom 2, Let There Be Carnage. That's pretty big range of quality of film. So there's a lot. I'm feeling uneasy on it.
I'll push back on the Serkis because I'm usually the guy that brings up the filmography here. And you're right. That's what I immediately thought of. But you also got to think, he's Gollum. I trust him as Gollum, a story around it.
He's the best part of the Hobbit movies, but Peter Jackson did the Hobbit movies.
Yeah. But, Peter Jackson, also is definitely on board with this. He's a producer, for God's sakes. So he's going to be helping him, with the reins here.
Okay. Well, we're jumping the gun because I think Michael revealed so much about Lord of the Rings lore that I had no idea. I had no idea the title of this was referred to in Return of the King.
Yes, in the book, in the appendices. Yeah.
And Aragorn plays a huge role along with Gandalf. I thought this story was going to be intriguing because I kind of presumed it was going to be a prequel type of story, almost it was set between The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings. But I thought it would have been easy. I thought it was going to be a smaller scale story, maybe less characters, less expansive, because how hard it would be to get back Ian McKellen, to get back Viggo Mortensen to play these iconic characters. If they were to do a sequel live action movie, I'm that's going to be impossible. There's so many directions it could go. But a prequel connector between The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship, this seems like it lines up perfectly. I'm not sure if it's going to be a direct adaptation because what I read, this is just a working title as of now. But that is crazy to me that they put a working title that has actual story to it from Return of the King. Did you expect that, Michael? Is that why you're so skeptical that we'd include characters that are so iconic from the original series trilogy?
Well, yeah, because let's be honest, I think what is the best, I think is a good analogy because I don't think so you can compare Lord of the Rings with Star Wars. And the reason why I don't think the fan base is as toxic as Star Wars fans, but they are as passionate. And Star Wars has they built a really rich world around it. And actually, besides the Rey movies, the best stuff that's come out since the prequel trilogy has really been the stuff focusing on the other parts of Star Wars. And so that's where I'm thinking with Lord of the Rings, you have such a rich world and universe and all these, you have the Silmarillion, which is it has so many stories in it. Why do we keep going back to the same ones? Let's leave that stuff alone and go make some new ones because it's already, there's so much story and plot and character development. That's kind of how I feel. You have so much to play with, especially Tolkien's famous for building everything out. You can really, there's untapped well to go after. Instead, they're going back to the same one that really is, you can't make it better. It's dry.
It is what it is. But when you say Silmarillion?
Yeah, it's a hard word to pronounce.
So,
it's
like,
about the Silmarils.
The hardest word in the history of.
I have trouble
It's like
saying.
Wait, so
English
is
dictionary.
I'm not confident I'm saying it right. So
Is that like a series of books that are like besides these the story that we know of Lord of the Rings, like The Hobbit and then...
no, it's the history of Middle Earth. It has a bunch of other stories in it, and Tolkien actually didn't finish it before he died. His son finished it based off his notes,
Okay.
and a lot of it was written by Tolkien himself, and then his son Chris finished it based off notes. And anyways, that's what Rings of Power was based off. They took a lot of liberties that weren't in the book, but like that's what I'm saying. Like then Lord of the Rings takes place in the Third Age. The Silmarillion goes to like the First Age, the Second Age, and then the Fourth Age. It goes pre and post Lord of the Rings. And like there's like Sauron's not even the big bad. Morgoth is he's the big bad. It's just like there's so much to play with that you can make iconic characters out of it.
But like, okay, I don't want to die. We can go down a rabbit hole.
I'm not trying to go sidebar, but I'm just saying like there's so much untapped potential. And instead they're going. There's also other books. There's Unfinished Tales, which is another thing that Tolkien wrote. Children of Hurin, which is kind of like a 300 version of Lord of the Rings.
So
really cool.
Yeah. So
but,
you're not happy with this news?
It's nostalgia. It's just nostalgia. It's a common thing that keeps happening with Hollywood. It's nostalgia. It's really like, where's the creativity?
This would be, you sound very much like just a non-rabid like Star Wars fan. Like you don't have foam coming out of your mouth and shit like you do. Like that's what I agree with you. That is kind of, I think that's a great analogy to like what Lord of the Rings fans are like. This is like the equivalent if we saw the sequel trilogy and we were finding out what next Star Wars project we're gonna have, and they green like a Darth Vader series, rather than like trying to explore something outside like the Skywalker saga, right? So I guess there is like a bit of disappointment from Lord of the Rings fans. I'm also curious because you seem to have some negative sentiments, or there's some like negative attitude towards like Rings of Power. When you look at like the Lord of the Rings fan base, what was their reaction to it? Because from my perspective, as someone who's not a diehard Tolkien head, I viewed Rings of Power. It didn't work for casual audiences, but it did work for people who love Lord of the Rings. Assess or evaluate my statement there.
So I have the opposite reaction. I think for casual audiences, it worked. And for Lord of the Rings, it didn't. And actually, it would have been a great fantasy series if it didn't have the Lord of the Rings attachment to it. But this is the problem with anything that's Lord of the Rings related. The trilogy was so great. If you slap on Lord of the Rings, it will, no matter what it is, The War of Rohirrim is coming out this year. That's an animated movie. It will still get compared to The Lord of the Rings.
War of the Rohirrim, that's a movie I'm highly anticipating because like it's a different form of, it's not live action. It's not a movie. It is a movie, but it's not a live action movie. It's not a TV show. It's like an anime style of film. It's like a different medium. So I think, well, let's see if it works. Maybe it works with younger audiences. I think people that love Lord of the Rings tend to be a little bit older, So I'm wondering if that's going to work at all. But that's taking place before The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings, right? So going. And so I presume the Gollum movie will take place between, and we talk about trying to expand and see different types of story. This is going to be before the Hobbit trilogy, correct?
Yeah, correct. Yeah. So it is like, it's an expansion. I just feel like, I think it's a little bit different because War of the Rohirrim's like, it's the battle that made Helm's Deep, like the battle for Hammerhell or whatever, Hammerhall. But like, it's why it's like a fortress for Rohan. And Theoden talks about it. But like, that's like the perfect example of what I'm saying is like doing something different. You're even bringing back different actors. The only actress that's coming back is the one that played, I forgot her name, the princess from Rohan with the blonde hair. She's come back as like a narrator, but everyone else is going to be a different actor, and it's like 200 years in the future. So that's, in the past. So that's the type of stuff I'm talking about.
Do you think like Viggo Mortensen, if he came back, would it be the same thing as like Obi-Wan Kenobi, like Ewan McGregor coming back as Kenobi? Do you think that's like comparable?
I actually do, yeah, because I think everyone still thinks of Viggo. He's done so much stuff now, and even like some really experimental stuff. What was that one movie that came out that like it's like the future with like
Crimes of the Future.
Yeah, so like he's done like some cool different stuff, but I think everyone still views him as Aragorn.
Yeah,
That's
you guys would view that as Ewan McGregor. I would view it like, I guess, like same time period. I kind of view it as like Mark Hamill because he's a little older than Ewan McGregor, right?
But I feel like as like I would say actor wise, like Ewan McGregor like is a freaking amazing actor, like awards nominated, and he's kind of
Gotcha.
experimental himself. Like Viggo Mortensen, he kind of like found his, like he was great as Aragorn, but I think he found his real stride and became like this like wow, like prestige type of actor. And like guys like, well, watch out, he's in this movie, like this could earn an Oscar. Like Green Book, you could say what you want about the movie, but he's getting nominated, right? Like the movie wins Best Picture, right? There's a reason for it, okay? Like Viggo Mortensen, he makes interesting decisions, like you said, Crimes of the Future, but it's like returning to the role 20 years after like the last time we saw you. It's just like timeline wise, it just makes a lot of sense to me, and the characters are kind of easy to like draw in comparison with Aragorn and Obi-Wan. You know,
Gotcha.
great facial hair on both, by the way. Ricky, I wanted to get to what you were talking about. You were discussing Andy Serkis, and Mike was talking about like his filmography, right? Obviously, a great motion capture guy, great as Gollum. We're gonna do Planet of the Apes this weekend. I think this you could call into question him becoming the director of this movie, being named the director of the movie, but it's someone that he's taking on a character he is so iconic with, and he's taking on a franchise, right, that would be, I would say, in decent hands even without Peter Jackson, but you throw him in the mix along with the writers of the original trilogy, it's basically like Peter Jackson's making this movie. You know, I trust it more than anything just because he is there alongside the guy who arguably had the best performance in the Lord of the Rings trilogy.
And you have a comfortability as well with Peter Jackson and the writers returning. And going back to what Big Mike was saying about how he hates how things are straying away from the book in Rings of Power and potentially not exploring other things inside the Tolkien verse here. It's like, oh, like the other writers are coming back. They're coming back for a reason. And it's got to be besides money because they made so much money off of the original trilogy and also The Hobbit. So I think they're going to get a little creative here and allow, like, basically give Serkis all the tools and resources, or not resources, all the tools and like story and plot and dialogue, everything basically, just to say, hey, take it and run with it. Not like Serkis having to orchestrate and put this thing together. You know, I think it's just going to be able to easily just, find that comfortability and just direct a good movie.
Yeah.
One thing I will say, I think they need to bring back practical effects, because I think that's one thing that hurt The Hobbit, was like it was so CGI that Lord of the Rings immersed you in it. The Hobbit is like you can tell you're watching a movie, or like and some of the CGI was bad at points. So I think practical effects and things like that, I think that will also help instead of all these CGI things. Because like if you watch The Lord of the Rings, then you watch The Hobbit like back to back, there's like a stark difference in just the production, the tone, everything.
That's a great point.
Consistently, though, it has been great motion capture. Benedict Cumberbatch, Andy Serkis coming in to direct this.
Yeah, they have to do that for Gollum.
Yeah, I think it's like this is like the other movies. Andy Serkis feels like he's kind of dicking around, like with Venom, Let There Be Carnage. It's like, well, let's just see what happens. Like Mowgli was a swing and a miss, and especially when there's like the Jungle Book's coming out in like the same year and Disney's doing it compared to his like experimental take. It's like, oh man, that's like a really bad timing here. But here it's like the comfortability with the character, but also this is what you are known for. This is like up your freaking alley if Gollum is the main character. Imagine trying to take direction from Andy Serkis when he's dressed up or he's in character as Gollum. That's going to be insane. I need to see the behind the scenes of this. I need to see what it's like on set.
Bring back DVDs, DVD extras.
Yes. I will buy like the Blu-ray. I will buy the DVD just to get like Andy Serkis with balding hair strands and him commanding people what to do in a Gollum voice. That's going to be electric.